La cuarta Conferencia Mundial de la Mujer, celebrada en
The fourth
de la igualdad de género. Cierto es que no se han desarrollado al ritmo, quizá que esperábamos. De derecho. A su vez, la perspectiva de género es esencial para la innovación y el progreso, y estamos aquí para dar un paso más hacia ese objetivo primordial, para considerarnos una sociedad democrática y sana digo en el sentido más amplio de la palabra. Sana también significa segura. En los próximos 2 días tendremos el gusto de contar con expertas de alto nivel que ampliarán nuestra mirada sobre campos concretos y nos hablarán de retos, pero también nos hablarán de oportunidades. Es importante que nos centremos también en ellas. Comencemos con la ponencia marco que tiene por título Ciencia, Tecnología e Innovación en, con y para la igualdad. Urge cambiar el chip. Es un honor para nosotras presentar a la destacada profesional María Ángeles Sallé, quien se distingue como una eminente doctora en Ciencias Sociales y un especialista en Políticas Públicas de Desarrollo Socioeconómico, Igualdad y Sociedad Digital. Su amplia experiencia y dedicación en todas estas áreas la convierten en una voz autorizada en desarrollo, igualdad y revolución digital. Un fuerte aplauso para la doctora Sallé.
Testing, testing. Can you hear us in the English booth? You can't hear us. Apparently we've been told that the sound's not getting through. We'll see if we can solve this issue as soon as possible.
Egunon, buenos días. A ver.
Good morning, everyone.
Bueno, realmente autoridades,
authorities, specialists, activists, dear friends, good morning. Let me first of all say that I am honored to be able to share this time with you and to be able to tell you about my experience and my reflections in this field. And being here is very special for me because I'm here to honor my parents. They were both from San Sebastian, from the neighborhood of Gros, and my grandmother, Felisa Ortiz de Zárate, who was a pioneering scientist in the field of health and who contributed a great deal to this city and was an inspiring example for all women in our family. And that makes me being here very special. Actually, I've chosen this long quote by María Ángeles Durán that I believe is key concerning the look we need to have when we tackle something which is as important as a shift in paradigm. She says that it would be asking too much if in the short time of a couple of generations, the newcomers were to create a monument of ideas similar to that which the accumulation of centuries has created in their absence. There's a lack of language, a lack of refinement of concepts, time in short, to transfer the experience of life to ideas. But it cannot be forgotten that this experience has been different and continues to be different, and that the majority of the world's women still lack a public voice, as if the difficulties of emerging, of creating awareness and language, of making oneself heard were not enough. There's also the fragile intellectual status of innovative experience. How to mark the boundaries between personal experience and anecdote. How to raise the known experience, still so little explicit and systematized, to the level of a category. In order to balance perspectives, it is not enough for women and other traditionally excluded social groups to reason and transfer their experiences about themselves, but they must do so about others and about the whole. In this sense, any contribution from innovative perspectives is both an advanced and frustrated aspiration, because in comparison with the complex edifice of ideas already dealt with, or the millions of other experiences that have filtered and given them the experiential basis for conceptual transformation, the efforts to filter and conceptualize new experiences are very modest, very insufficient. So when we're talking about a paradigm shift in this area where women have been invisible, we cannot have a closed system from the very beginning. We need to build something in an innovative way, in a different way. My presentation will be dense. It contravenes all recommendations about how to make a presentation. I'm very sorry about that. But I couldn't think of a different way of putting this. I cannot just give you some headlines and that's it. That will come later. First of all, we need a great deal of information, and we've got many data. We still lack data as well, but we need to move from an analysis of the manifestations to alternatives and go deep into the root causes, which means that we need to look at the knowledge that is still yet to be completed. I've used many references to studies, mainly from the UK, by the way, because in our world, in Spanish-speaking world, we don't have many specific references about studies that have been carried out. So basically, just don't pay attention to the data. I'll be giving you many facts and figures, but please, I want you to understand the trends, right? I'm going to talk about three things. First of all, the scenario, then gaps and possible causes, root causes, using the systemic approach from education, employment, career, science, technology, etc., and some challenges. And, well, I'll go through this very quickly, but I believe it's important to say that we are in an environment of radical transformation in a context of multiple crises, an environment, a context where we have many disciplines converging in what we call the bang, bits, atoms, neurons, and genes, with exponential scientific progress and with technology being cross-cutting more and more every day. So this is an uncertain future, an unknown future, which will not be a projection of the known past. I think these are the glasses that we need to be wearing. I like this quote by Helga Novotny very much, that says that we need to recur to complexity and ask what we can learn about complex systems in order to better face the uncertainties of the future. Science helps us to understand and better model the complex systems. We need multiple perspectives that capture the diversity of human experience. Each of which has partial solutions to offer. We need updated standards, norms to guide human behavior and institutions best suited to deal with the inherent uncertainty of the future, which means that nobody has the whole truth, right? And so one of our main problems and one of the solutions we have in our hands is to learn to work in a hybrid way. We need to bring perspectives together and work hand in hand. Right. As for gaps and possible root causes, I will talk about four different points here. Mainly the first one, the CTI subject, who, but I will also talk about the content of CTI, its purpose, and if we look at the subject of science and technology innovation, we'll realize that we cannot intervene in what's going on with women in this field if we don't do it in an articulated way, in the whole life cycle. Because inequality is systematic and accumulates all along a woman's life, and therefore we need to look at things from this perspective of having the life cycle into consideration and understanding how transitions occur. If we look at the first stage, which is socialization, we will see that the gaps start very early on and require this cross-cutting approach. But we also need a vertical approach of science, technology and innovation, CTI. because there are common elements to them, and they also have very different elements to them. We need to have to focus on different strategies in each one of the fields, right? For instance, as for science, it is not true that women do not participate. They do participate a lot. In fact, we have many clear examples here in this room. As for technology, we participate a little bit less, and in innovation, we have mixed reality. And if we asked you in this room what we understand as innovation, I think we will get a different answer per individual. I mean, this term is very diverse. For some people, it will have to do with young, dynamic entrepreneurs in the field of technology. Some other people will say it has to do with knowledge transfer. But it is key for us to agree and define these concepts very accurately. And the same thing goes for this concept, STEM. I don't very much like it, I have to admit it, because I believe it's a concept that doesn't help us to understand what's going on with women in the field. As I said, in science, women participate, especially if we use these bio or social prefixes where they are a majority. We are less present in experimental sciences or technology, especially in disruptive technologies. Well, there we have a lack of female presence. And as for mathematics, women participate, but in a limited way, because they have reduced their presence. But this is not the case when the specialty is oriented to social purposes, especially teaching. So this is not a problem with women's attitude. Women, a few years back, represented half of students in mathematics in Spain, and now they only represent 30-odd%. Why? Because studying mathematics was no longer related to teaching, to working with people, and it's become a discipline related to the field of this technology. So let's start looking at socialization and education. Let me give you a few facts and figures. At 5, a very high number of people think about traditional gender roles. Women are teachers and men are policemen. When we are 6, women interiorize and believe that they have less possibility to believe that they are intelligent. In France, for instance, young people between 11 and 13 give us a very different outcome when carrying out the same exercise, according of whether we call it an exercise of geometry or drawing. When we are 15, at the age of 15, girls triple the number of boys in their professional projection in the areas of health, while boys double the number of girls perceiving themselves as future engineers and multiply by 8 their projections as ICT professionals. Girls, science to prevent disease, boys, energy and movement. That's what they think. Similarly, there is evidence that girls lose interest in computer science when they're introduced to a traditional computer lab. We'll see later on. I'm going to skip through this very quickly, but I just want you to look at the graphs. How? Well, it is true that there is a difference in scores in maths in 4th year of primary school. This is the team's project. The next one will be published in 2024. This is a study assessing cognitive competences. And we see there is actually a difference, right? We're dropping, except for OCDE average. But you see, if we look at sciences, even if there's a slight drop, there's no difference in average scores in the 4th year of primary school. And this matches a difference of the girls and boys saying that they like maths. And in this case, we see a difference between girls and boys, but there isn't any difference between, in the case of science. Girls say they like science very much at that age. And of course, this is consistent with learning mathematics and learning science. Everything is really consistent. Then we see this is also consistent with the fact that we have more boys studying science and technology in secondary school. So things seem to be pretty clear here. If we look at technology in secondary school. We see the figures in 2008. 20% of girls chose technology versus boys. And then if we look at the PISA program, the PISA is a program for international student assessment that assesses competences in mathematics and science and reading with 15-year-old students. And we see that the average scores in mathematics evolves. Then look at the outcomes in science. And here we see some of the factors that were studied in the last PISA program in 2018, where we see there are clear differences here in the competitiveness index of students. Boys are much more competitive than girls. Fear to failure. Look at the difference here, the gap here between boys and girls when they're 15, right? This is the motivation to improve ideas, and you see there's a huge gap here. In this case, girls are less competitive, but they are more of a perfectionist themselves. They feel happy when they make an effort, when they give everything they have in an exercise. And this is the self-efficiency index, and there's a difference here, a gap between boys and girls. In this case, favors boys. So, what are the expectations when they get a job when they're 30? Well, we see that normally women work in the field of health. That is a scientific field. Now, let's look at the moment where they need to choose their studies. What can we expect from girls that are 16, 17, 18 years of age? So they come to this age and they have this past. They're perfectionists, they're hardworking, insecure, self-demanding. They want to have a social impact. They want to work with their community. They're very practical, not very competitive, and not arrogant. They're holistic. And so we tell them, girls, please come to science and technology. But science and technology is not attractive to them. We will see later on why. They believe that they are placing them out of their comfort zone, that they will become them in a minority, that they will experiment the loneliness in their most tribal moment. They will feel like freaks. They are perfectionists. They have the best scores, and we are now telling them that will not be having good scores and probably have A's in some cases. They are therefore feeling that they're going to disappoint their loved ones. They will renounce other interests that are important for them, because the rest of their lives is incompatible with these studies. So, in many cases, on top of this, they will not be welcome. They will have to drop out. So we're only convincing a minority of women. Who? The ones that are incredibly gifted in mathematics or technology, or come from a background, a family background. For instance, they're the children of engineers or others, and so they have this vocation, right? But this is not the case in most of the case of girls of this age. Look at this facts and figures. Girls are systematically better students at all levels. They have higher educational levels, even those who work in artificial intelligence. This is not a problem with the attitude of women, young women, right? And you see here some examples about scores in secondary school and in their university degrees. Systematically, they get better grades. And this is very important for them, because this is the passport to be able to compete and in this very highly competitive world. And then look at something. This is very important in this survey on science and technology. The interest for science and technology is twice as much among men than women. In 2020, the interest of women was 13.9. You see what the main gap is between 15 and 24 years of age. 30.3% of men versus 13.6% of women. That's a moment where they're choosing what they're going to study, right? And on top of that, they compete with more interesting possibilities that have to do with their strengths. At 15, girls are twice as good in reading as in science and mathematics, and they're far better than boys, according to PISA. So, if you ask them, what will move you to choose something that you're worse at? And why don't we think there's a problem that there is this inverse gender gap in terms of reading? Because we're not told that girls are that good at reading. We only speak about science and mathematics. People are always talking from our weaknesses, not from the viewpoint of our strengths. We need to change that.
I think this gives us an idea about how we need to teach people and how we can't make girls take a dichotomous decision. Now, I've talked to many young girls in my family environment that at the age of 16, they're really good at science and mathematics. But if they're artistic as well, why should they have to give that up? It shouldn't be either humanities or science, or art or science. That's the problem, that dichotomy, because that's exactly when the girls say, right, well, I'm going to go and do what I do best. It's not good enough to be good. We have to contextualize all of this. And it's not just a problem with capacities and negative stereotypes. Girls don't choose blindly. They are, when they're forced to choose between two opposing decisions, what we don't realize is that this dichotomy is saying that science and technology is oriented towards things and everything else is oriented towards people. And girls don't want to choose something that is just oriented towards things rather than people. So it's not just girls that have to change, it's the system that has to change, because it's a system that just assumes that we're going to accept everything without questioning it. So girls and young women are not actually that far off from wanting to do science with a purpose, and it would make much more sense in that sense. And they would need to have a new framework that considers them not as absent, but as rather resilient, not as incapable of choosing well, but rather as endowed with the necessary wisdom, not as laggards, but endowed with obsolete values, but rather as bearers of emerging leadership models. And basically, we need to attach greater value to this type of leadership, because this leadership is really showing us the way, showing us what is required for both men and women. Very, very quickly, let me just show you what happens to women in vocational training and university level. Systematically, there are very, very low percentages in science and technology. Here we have just 17%. There is a total segregation here in the different levels of studies. Women tend to focus on subject and men on objects. This is where the dividing line is. Here we can see in mid-level vocational training, 7.8% is the percentage for computer science and communications, and 86% are women in social, cultural and community services. If we have a look at higher level vocational training, you can see that it's very, very similar. So here we can see data up until the year of 2020, up until 2020, but things aren't changing. You can see that there's very little change at all. It's either stagnant or, in fact, the participation of girls in these particular environments has actually reduced as the years have gone by. And then let's have a look at access to university. And now here, girls actually get better grades Even those who are going to be studying engineering and architecture, the grade that they get, the marks that they get, are higher. And if we look at the university careers, undergraduate degrees, if we have a look at what's been happening over recent years, we've got data here from the 2021 academic year. We can see that 77.8% are in education, 14.1% are in computer skills. So, I don't know, do we have to have more girls in art, more boys in art? I don't know. Maybe we should just make sure that there are no gaps. Let's have a look at IT, 14.1%. At the master's level, well, there are more of them, because if they've actually managed to undergo the pass their undergraduate degree, they often tend to go on to do a master's degree. And PhD level as well, we have IT 23 and health and social services 62.2%. What do we see here? That when you add the prefix bio, things change. Biomedicine 77%, biochemistry 68%, biotechnology 62%. They're with the majority. Women are the majority in those undergraduate degrees. And even in technology degrees, if you put the word bio in, the girls flock to go to it. So here's some very interesting data about the evolution over recent years. Up until 2017-2018, the number of students in computer science have been decreasing. And the gender gap in the composition of the student body has actually widened even more. So there is a very important gender gap. And in fact, the gender gap is still 67.4% in 22-23. In mathematics, we were talking about girls accounting for 50% of the total. Now, people say that girls have a particular penchant for mathematics. That's not the case. I think we have to improve teaching of mathematics, but that doesn't mean that, girls just don't have the right head for mathematics. That's wrong completely. Let's have a look at medicine. Now, the total number of enrollments has actually decreased, but only among men. Among women, the number of enrollments has actually increased, and at this moment in time, from 2002 onwards, we've gone from 22,000 girls to 30,000 women. So 70.6% of the student body were women in the 22-23 academic year. Now, we have to make sure that medicine shouldn't become a precarious profession, because we're not saying that women have to enter science, because women do enter science. They enter medicine mainly. Let's have a look at chemistry. Majority of students are women. In industrial and construction engineering, the gap has actually increased by 9% over recent years. But of course, we shouldn't forget that each engineering degree is different. So what does this mean? It means that systematically, all studies say that men prefer to work with things, women prefer to work with people, and the key decision factors are interest and need, not aptitude. And studies have told us that in places like Azerbaijan, Thailand, etc., there women are a majority in these particular degrees. But in countries, so basically this is the only way forward for them, but in Finland, Norway, Sweden, the USA, here as well, women tend to prefer, when they get the choice, if they get the choice, the world of science and objects and technology isolated from society and everything vocational. If women get to choose, then they choose the other alternative. The problem, as I said before, is the fact that they are forced to choose between two very different worlds. It's a dichotomy, and it shouldn't be. And there's a lack of role models for women in science and television. Technology people and technologists are always men, in the majority. And all of this, there's a pattern. You have role models in the technology sector. Is based on dominance, on dependence on technology. technology that seeks to bend nature and people, and whose ultimate task or purpose is to break and overcome and transcend limits. This is a very dangerous paradigm. It's far removed from the relationship that most women scientists and technologists have with their profession. It's also a far cry from most real innovations, which do in fact contribute to improving the world. And also we need to focus on the role of teachers and families, and because they have a very important role to play. Same thing with employment. Here we can see these are data from recent times, the second quarter of 2023. All of this, these data are all consistent. Now, if we now look at the field of science and research, exactly the same thing happens. Female researchers account for almost 40% of all research personnel in Spain. There's parity in the public administration and private non-profit organisations, but there is huge underrepresentation in the business sector, with a major decrease in the case of women aged under 35 years of age. The Basque Country has the lowest percentage of female researchers out of all of Spain. More than half of female researchers are concentrated in social sciences and medical sciences, and the proportion has actually increased over the last 5 years. So, as you can see, in the same period, the number and proportion of female researchers in the areas of engineering and technology, 12%, has actually decreased by 6.5%, while the number of men has increased by 2.8%. We have the scissors effect. We'll see that in a minute, what that actually means. This is exacerbating the situation. And women actually are suffering a greater degree of precariousness and instability, greater dissatisfaction with their professional career than their male colleagues. So we can see this is the typical scissors graph. There you can see at the beginning there are more women, and then the number of women as the level goes up drops. And here we can see segregation horizontal segregation between different sectors. And it's consistent. So people often talk about the glass ceiling, the broken rung. A key period in scientific careers, also in technological careers and in most sectors, coincides with the time when families are being formed and women having babies. There's a mismatch between the real professional life of most women and a hegemonic model of a linear and concentrated career. And many women accommodate their careers. They stop their professional progress and they move into more flexible occupations below their potential, or they drop out altogether. We also have the John and Jennifer effect. So, for example, if they're applying for a fictitious position as a laboratory manager with the same CV, this is a study carried out in the US, we can see that the difference between how they were assessed, and this is an unconscious bias that happens in many, many places. They always say that there's a gap between the number of scientific publications produced by men and women. And part of this is due to a lack of clear rules on authorship and the fact that the contributions made by women to research teams is less recognised. But in general, women are 13% less likely to endorse the research in which they participate, mainly high-impact research. And there are also biases in scientific promotion decisions. There's been a very in-depth study on this, and it says that has seen that there are unconscious differences and biases when people have to decide on how to assess the contribution made by male and female researchers. We also have a drought of scientific awards, although we've got some Nobel laureates now. There's a lower success rate of applications for projects with a female principal investigator. Very subtle issues as well. So, for example, the negative effect of multiple choice tests. So women being more perfectionist, if we don't know what the answer is, we tend to leave it blank. Unless, we get penalised. There are studies at universities in Turkey and in Spain that in fact show that women especially female medical students, lose out if they actually have to do a multiple choice test. And then we have non-promotable tasks. This is another issue. Because we're women, often in organizations, we get told to do certain tasks. For example, there's an intern coming. Can you go and make them feel welcome? Can you write the minutes of the meeting? Can you just, have a look and make sure that there's a good professional climate because there are conflicts, we need to resolve them. All of these are non-promotable tasks. And in fact, some women spend up to 1 month of their time a year doing these tasks, and they paralyze their professional advancement because they're not taken into account when people are thinking about who to promote. And all of this has to do with the subject and people. Everything that has to do with people as subjects is penalized. We just need to understand that medicine is going to be a much more precarious profession in the future because it's become highly feminized. And the same thing with these particular tasks. They're key tasks, but they're invisible tasks, and they're not recognized in comparison going to a conference, for example. And then we always have another bias, which has to do with proximity. So often, women, like I said, they suffer also from the Matilda effect, which consists of the systematic relegation and undervaluation suffered by women scientists in terms of recognition of their talent. Then we have imposter syndrome. I'm sure that if we were asked any women in this room, if they've ever felt imposter syndrome, that we would all put up our hands. What about self-promotion? There's also a gender gap in self-promotion. Men negotiate their salaries 4 times more than women, and women, if they do, ask for 30% less. Male-led scientific teams are 21% more likely than female-led teams to use positive adjectives such as novel, unique, interesting, or innovative to refer to their research results. And women self-cite less, and this has a major it penalizes women in LinkedIn, for example. So women self-cite less, and they rate their performance as being lower than men do. So these are psychological problems as well as structural problems, and altogether they kind of have a great big soup of biases that we all have to work with. Here we can see some images. I'm sure they will ring bells, these images, for you. Now, this is a quote from a book that's just been published. Something that Beatriz Arias Gago says. She said, "In order to achieve my goals, I spent superhuman extra added time beyond my limits and on more than one occasion to prove my competence, but to whom?" And of course, that added stress of expecting to be discovered at any moment as the fraud that I feared I was simply devastating. Imposter syndrome puts 100-fold magnifying glass on the day-to-day, standing as the implacable judge who dismantles all your efforts at the slightest mistake. But there are also those who say that imposter syndrome directs our vision towards correcting women at work rather than correcting the places where women work. Guilt syndrome, for one thing and for that it's total opposite. This is very curious. This is a terrible thing that we have to suffer, and it has to do with how we think, how we're doing everything badly in our personal lives. And in this structural context, we judge ourselves very harshly, really harshly. But the problem, despite everything, we're still there, so we're not doing too badly. Let's have a think at technology. Now, in technology, there is an absolutely brutal gender gap. Not in the junior positions, but there are important biases here in the world of technology. But especially in disruptive technology, there's a massive gap. There is a technology talent gap. Only 1 out of every 5 ITC specialists are women at a European level. But where do those that do work in these technology companies work in the social media and e-commerce? Only 23% of women STEM specialists end up in tech jobs, as opposed to 40% of men. But at the same time, 44% of women in ICT jobs come from non-tech educational backgrounds and learn on the job. And this is really important because we have women who are in non-STEM careers between the ages of 18 and 21, and they can move to digital jobs, but they don't want to. They can, but they don't. I mean, what should we do? Should we just all jump off a cliff? We're in a situation when technology is becoming more cross-cutting, but we can see that most of the women who are in ICT jobs come from non-technical backgrounds. So we really have to focus on non-technological young girls and young women, and we're not really looking at them. We're not examining what they do. There's also a high female rate of dropout from technology degrees. And the deficit of women in disruptive technologies is absolutely brutal. And they're the fastest growing technologies in jobs. Globally, less than 26% of women of everyone working in AI are women. There's only 12% in machine learning, 14% in cloud computing, 6% in mobile applications, less than 6% in software design, 20% in cybersecurity, 10% in setting metaverse standards, 13% in Python developers. So it's incredible. There's a massive, massive gender gap here. Men make up more than 80% of AI faculty at universities. And all the data are just catastrophic, basically. And within AI, how are we doing? Well, there's a high proportion of women in the areas of health, education, justice, human mobility, content production, and of course, gender equality. And the concentration in product design and management is slightly higher, 46%. But there's a low participation in development ops and cloud roles, only 8%. In computing and operations, 15%, which are the most in-demand roles. So there are studies that are trying to work out what's happening with women in the field of artificial intelligence. There's also segregation. There's a greater focus on subject rather than object. And despite having a higher formal education, women aren't doing so well in that particular field. There are vacancies in Spain in the technology sector. In fact, 72% of digital specialists in Spain are external personnel, so they're subcontracted person as well. There's a very high percent of those who emigrate after graduating because, of course, we're talking about a global industry, the digital and technological industries. They go looking for a better job. So there are lower salaries, poorer learning opportunities, together with a higher demand for time dedication. If you add to that the lack of channels and incentives in companies to enable juniors to acquire the necessary experience, this is the reason why young people tend to leave the country to look for jobs elsewhere. And there's a very high turnover in the sector as well. Only 1.7% of employed women work in the digital technology sector in Spain, while in the case of men, this percentage is 6.2%. So this puts us 18th in the ranking in this dimension, a very low average level. This is according to the Digital Economy and Society Index. In the Basque Country, there's good news because among companies with ICT specialists, the proportion of those employing women is 9% above the average for Spain. In frontier sectors, women just represent 12%, in cloud computing, for example. And the presence of women among ICT specialists has decreased at a European level from 22.5% in 2010 to 17.9% in 2020. In Spain, it reduced from 22.7% to 19.7%. We've even seen in the latest edition of the Labour Market Insertion Survey of university graduates that despite the fact that the highest employment rates achieved by graduates in 2014 were among those who studied ICT degrees, the employment rates of computer science graduates stood at 99.5% for men and only 88.4% for women. What do we have here? Well, we don't have very inclusive practices and cultures. There's a very high level of women leaving the sector after they become mothers. Global careers aren't very compatible with a local life. There's a lack of a good work-life balance. In fact, 25% of professionals cite the lack of work-life balance as a key reason for giving up their careers. The concept of technology as an end in itself, as applied to things and forged in terms of masculine activities rather than as a means applied to people. This is another reason. There is a perception of the data science sector as being unpleasantly nerdy, theoretical, abstract, not purposeful enough. And what do the professionals themselves say? They say that it's not a very nice place to live, it has a very low impact, and there are really important differences between men and women in this sense. So why is it that we have to be competing all the time? Why is it so competitive? There are also problems with harassment and denigration on platforms and in video games, and there's a lack of role models as well, and a perceived incongruence between female gender roles and technological roles. 7 out of 10 female technologists feel that they need to work harder and prove themselves more because of their gender. Many women feel stuck in their careers. And what do they cite as the main reasons for this or leaving their company? Well, they cite a lack of management support, a lack of good opportunities from their employers, as they cite that as a need to change organizations. The different elements that really make a difference between staying or leaving an industry career are role models, 75%. Of those who stayed with their company said that it was because of role models. Peer communities are really important as well. But also career training is important as well. So profiles aren't really well understood. They're constantly changing across occupational practices, so it's an omnivorous approach. Women are being assessed in accordance with profiles that haven't yet been defined properly. There are gender differences also in self-assessment and self-presentation. And this is what Judy Wagman says. She's a fantastic Australian author. And she says that this is an issue of how the world we live in is designed and for whom. And she is not just in AI. We're talking about the way in which we interact with machines and the way in which our life is defined. So there are differences in patent applications. There's also a concentration of women inventors in life sciences and public research organizations and universities. At the current rate, women will not be involved in half of the inventions patented in the 5 largest intellectual property offices until 2080. In Spain, only 37.6% of inventors are women. Information and communications have the highest concentration of patents, and women are not well represented there. In the biotechnology sector, 57.5% of the total are women. That's great. But the level of women present in the more innovative SMEs is very, very low. So it's really important when we also look at innovation. And here the deficit isn't just of presence, but it's also a deficit of recognition and attribution. There's a bias that identifies innovative behavior on the basis of masculine logic. Once again, the myth of the individual genius. And usually women don't identify with this. So we have the Innovative Institute for the Disruption of the Automatic Machines of the Artificial Universe. If you read that, the women just run for the hills, basically. Women innovate, although many don't know it, but they tend to do so in a much more purposeful and much more useful way. But that's obviously not recognized, which means that many, many women fall just below the radar. Just even more quickly, I'm going to just talk about startups. 14% of co-founders are female, and 4% of female founders. 4% of founders are female globally. Companies founded by women received only 2.3% of venture capital investment in 2021, and only 7.2% of business angels are women. In the elevator pitch presentation, male entrepreneurs, in this case American, are 60% more likely than female entrepreneurs to benefit using exactly the same proposal. And this is despite the fact that women have a higher success rate, a higher and faster return on investment, and greater business sustainability. So we've just seen the publication of the entrepreneurial map in Spain. There are very few women on it. Many fewer entrepreneurs, even though women have a higher educational level than men, etc. And as you can see, this is there. Nothing is changing. The data aren't evolving. Participation isn't increasing. And here we can see the same. We have different cultures and practices in areas of promotion and investment in startups. It's strongly male.
Narratives about innovative entrepreneurship that don't recognize the role of women. The main example here is Gazin and Dara, who were entrepreneurs who had to create an imaginary partner, Keith Mann, to be successful in investment context. It may seem a joke, but it's not. And there's a huge impact of this code in when it comes to finding public and private funding. There's another case like Heidi and Howard Roizen that was assessed in a different way. Women are competent and men are aggressive. Well, that's something well known, that there are problems in the ecosystem, because the ecosystem has values that are related to this way of understanding what being an entrepreneur, an ideal entrepreneur is. And I have here my ideal model of an entrepreneur. You may not be able to read it, but back there, but it's basically a paradigm where you have, on the one hand, you have the economic, social, business purpose, object versus subject, individual vision versus collective vision, outside versus inside, alone versus in company, money, affection, milestone process, visibility, invisibility, personal project versus collective project, disruption versus sustainability. Well, this is a code that is absolutely dichotomical, that makes it that an ordinary entrepreneur, female entrepreneur, will not be seen. I mean, we need to change this code. What does it mean to be an ideal entrepreneur? Well, there are many different ways of being a successful entrepreneur, and we need to model this looking at reality and saying what women are doing. But there are many women that are entrepreneurs in the field of innovation, but they're not seen. And finally, leadership and governance. There is consensus when it comes to thinking that disruptive technologies, particularly artificial intelligence, cannot be ruled as others, and we need therefore a new governance framework. And there is this crucial discussion we're not participating in. There are people thinking in the long run, some others that prefer to look at immediate problems and risks related to misinformation, transparency, security, property, ownership of data, privacy, polarization, cyber violence in social media, and the impact all this has on the employment, discrimination, new digital gaps, etc., etc., etc. The EU is a pioneer in the development of principles and policies to foster the potential of these technologies towards a common good. But the EU doesn't have much power in the international arena yet, and women are absent in the environment where the future is decided upon in this world where there are many tensions, and where women only have 5% of the leadership positions in the field of technology at a global level. There are executives or senior managers in corporations, of course, but they don't participate in ownership. This is intolerable. This is a systemic race that has huge consequences. Here we have some quotes about the impact of artificial intelligence, and of course about how we can manage and how we can deal with this situation, especially we deal it with the women. As for science, technology and innovation, STI, I will say that there are many biases there. We're worse off in that sense. Research and technology have this ideal profile that is a white man that's in his 50s, etc. And this is represented in medical trials, and this has huge consequences. For instance, when it comes to designing drugs, there are 7,000 pathologies where women are worse diagnosed when it comes to assessing the risk of mortality of women. Here we can see bias in digital platforms. Here we have discrimination, clear discrimination against women, especially black women. The algorithmic discrimination of this could be a topic for a whole conference for days. We could talk about it for days and days and then. There's a concern in the field. Here, women made a global analysis with 133 systems of artificial intelligence, and 44% showed gender bias. So there is a great deal of data about work discrimination in selection processes, in hiring processes, due to the bias from artificial intelligence. And this is true in all industries, from airbags and seatbelts that are not adapted to women. Also, the height of the pedals of the car, the dashboard, public transport, public toilets even. In England, for instance, a study has been carried out about parity concerning public toilets. And this is from 2 odd to 1, and whereas the ratio between men and women is 1 to 1. Okay. What can we say about STA? This is not just about integrating and including gender in science and technology, but also promoting the contribution of STA to gender equality in a proactive way. And so here we have a definition of the concept of development. This is not just about benefiting women. We need this to be built with women and from their perspective and priorities. STI should be oriented towards equality and sustainability of life, because what is at stake right now is life itself, and there will only be STI for sustainable development if sustainability of life is placed at center stage. And this means that we need to redefine STI from this perspective. It's true that there are specific R&D lines in terms of STI where headway has been made, but there's still there's yet much to be done. And the same thing goes with the ecosystem. I'm going to skip through this even faster because we're going to be talking about that in the next round table. But of course, our colleagues are going to say that much is being done, but yet even more is yet to be done. Because if we don't have an ecosystem that is adapted, that's changing, that is prepared and ready, that has knowledge, data, networks, and everything well developed, then gender gap will not be reduced. It's hard to move forward, to do things differently. And let me finish very, very quickly with some associated challenges to all this cycle that starts in when we're young and ends with power and governance. Okay, the existing gaps in science, technology and innovation environments can only be understood and addressed in the broader context of gender structures and relations. This has a systemic nature to it. It's repeated in each and every one of the spaces we talked about in jobs, professional careers, entrepreneurship. This is systemic, and we should look at it as systemic. Always having this radar active between subjects and objects, right? Because otherwise, when we look at STEM, we'll talk generically about things that then are actually different in reality. The change should be bi-directional. The subject of change are not just women, their attitude, but the system as a whole, time, language, decision-making process. Everything needs to be more hybrid, more inclusive. I don't know you, but I always recurrently ask the same question. Women do not want to get to the summit. You know, you give them the chance and see what they do. They don't take it. Well, this is not the approach we need. The approach we need is, we need to think, can this complex world not use half of its population, more than the half of the qualified talent? And all that talent that, looking at the data, knows much more about how to manage human life? Can we not use that, not make the most of that? That is the million-dollar question. And what we need to do to take it into consideration, to make the most of it. This, of course, requires from us to do away with this dichotomy between science, technology, and humanities. We need to focus not just in the absence, but in the presence, because only if we look at the presence of women will we be able to see how strong we are, how powerful we are in this environment. I think that we are fed up with just being qualified from what we lack. We're fed up with that. We've had enough of this. It seems that we're always lacking something. And whenever we get it, then we lack something else, because that is no longer valid. Okay, that's not the approach we need. Clearly, we need to look at the spaces where we are. We cannot be left at the margin of a revolution in science and technology. So we need to build a new framework of digital humanities. We need to include women, and we need to be present in science and social science and life science in general. We need to be taken into consideration. By the way, whenever we talk about digital humanities and technological humanism, I haven't seen women there in those fora. And I wonder, what are they talking about? I mean, women are there in humanities. They're a majority in that field, and they're not being taken into consideration. The knowledge is not being heard. Well, we need to look at subjects, but also at objects, right? As for socialization and education, well, great deal to be done here. I insist, not just concerning competences and empowerment in schools, but also in orientation. We need to completely change things. We haven't done enough here. And you see that there are some age ranges that are key, and this is not just about us saying, hey girls, come here and forget about everything else. No, we need to change our language, make a more comprehensive and deep guidance training for guidance staff, teachers. We need to look at social network and social media, and always remember that we cannot attract anyone without projecting, transforming, sustaining. We really concentrate on attracting vocation, but we tend to forget about everything else. As for the university, we need to expand ICT studies and transform curriculum, practice and cultures in engineering and computing science careers. There are many interesting things that can be done here, and let me finish very, very quickly, even faster. Let me say that we need to bring technology to humanistic, social, and biohealth, academic, and professional environments, doing so from its own parameters and narratives. If you ask me, this is urgent. This is where the young ladies are now. This is where they are, and we're not doing enough. We're not doing anything. There are some experiences, but they need to be articulated, made visible, and valued. Other across-the-board measures like incentives, participation, quotas, university community oriented towards equality, and of course we need to orient, we need guidance, we need curriculum and practices and cultures in classrooms for transformation and self-transformation. I believe that girls and young women and young men at university, they need to know more about the world. They need to generate and come up with personal strategies, right? This is not just a sex-gender system. We need to change things radically. We need to change the way that the gender is incorporated in the university. And as for employment, well, there's a lot to be done, especially digitization and feminized occupations, and we need to get more knowledge, qualitative knowledge here, to be able to work on the main causes of the problems, to be more efficient in alternatives. As for technology, well, same thing here. As for innovation, well, we need to change our narratives and practices. We need to foster more female participation by making their innovation visible, and innovating is hybridating as well. As for startups, let's first of all support the women that are already there. They require our support, much more support as a startup, because they never qualify, even they're wonderful and have a huge impact. And we need to transform that, the bigger the better. This is the culture we have, right? Well, we need to go back to things that may not be that big. We need to go back to the reality where there is room for women or female entrepreneurs that have startups. And concerning leadership and governance, we need more female participation in decision-making processes. As the president of the Basque Country said, we need an accelerated training strategy for leadership. We can't say, well, we do this, we do that, but we still have only have 15% women here. No, we need to take chances here. We need to take risks. That means we need to have a hybrid system or a hybrid way of understanding new policies, because we need more neuro equality, because neurosciences have a huge contribution to make to equality policies. So we need to bring these worlds together, STI and equality. We need to bring these two together to come up with innovative working lines that are experimental at first, of course. We shouldn't fear that. We shouldn't be afraid of experimenting, making mistakes. We need to go for trial and error, because if we keep doing the same thing, even if we have highly qualified people doing small things, generally speaking, with not much power or visibility, it won't be enough. We need to integrate the existing experiences and create a network and share them and make them visible. That's important. That's key. And the future of the world in such a decisive field cannot be left in a rich and technology-based hands or in the hands of men. We are said to act like a minority, but we are not a minority as women, right? Let's believe in ourselves. We need to come up with alliances between STI. Together we'll be much stronger. We will make a difference. We need new lines of knowledge. We need to transfer knowledge, have an impact on gender gap. We are losing empowerment, and let's not forget that science is absolutely key. As, for instance, other activities carried out in different companies that have to do with that social dimension of things, right? So we need to have a clear commitment to include this topic and mainstream it in all agendas by articulating proposals and voices. So we come up with a real STI community that goes beyond the labs, that connects STI with the whole of the society and its needs. So it is urgent to change the narrative, the agenda, the subjects of the scientific digital transformation if we want to truly integrate women as co-protagonists here, hand in hand with men. It shouldn't be a dichotomy. We're not saying, well, man, you're out. No, that's not the idea. Okay, this is why it's important for men to be there. You need to be involved in this revolution. But if it's not us, then who? And if it's not now, then when? Someone said this, right? So we need to move from changing ourselves to adapt the world to being ourselves to change the world. That, I think, is our main challenge. A true way to empowerment, a personal and at the same time shared path. Thank you very much indeed.
Muchas gracias, doctora Sallé.